Yell into that face.
I can yell without this. I have my teacher's voice on today. Purest water in the world right here is being threatened by the Mountain Valley Pipeline. So I am Rory Johnson from the Power Coalition. Has been fighting the Mountain Valley Pipeline for 8 years. I am the co-chair. I'm also a member of Preserve Monroe, protecting our pristine Monroe County, West Virginia. I'm also associated with ABRA and anybody else that's wanting to fight these pipelines and horrible projects. The Mountain Valley Pipeline runs right behind my house. This is from the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The cumulative effects, scientific fix is unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and planet health, and further delays is concerted, anticipatory global action on adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. Very high confidence. I'm going to say that again. It poses a threat to the earth. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Helen. I'm with Shutdown DC. I'm here today because I have a disability, among many other factors, and lately the summers have just gotten much too much for me. DC summers have always been pretty bad, right? If you've lived here for a few years, you know. But they're getting hotter and hotter, and people like me just can't go outside anymore many days in the summer. I have a friend with a disability who had to leave the city because things got so bad for her. She just couldn't go out during the daytime in the summer at all. And we're going to have more and more people with disabilities as long COVID becomes more and more prevalent. And I'm very worried what's going to happen to our community as climate change gets worse. So here's my fact. Climate change has caused substantial damages and increasingly irreversible losses in terrestrial, freshwater, and coastal and open marine ecosystems. High confidence. The extent and magnitude of climate change impacts are larger than estimated in previous assessments. High confidence. Widespread deterioration of ecosystem structure and function, resilience, and natural adaptive capacity, as well as shifts in seasonal timing, have occurred due to climate change. High confidence. With adverse socioeconomic consequences. High confidence.
Good morning. My name is Tafari Gabriel. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Greenpeace USA. Before Greenpeace, I served for 28 years as a labor activist here in the United States and around the world. And my last stop was at the Executive Vice President of the National AFL-CIO. I moved to Greenpeace because I know we got no time to waste. Because I know if I care about workers and we need to stand up for workers, there ain't gonna be any jobs on a dead planet. I'm here today on behalf of Greenpeace worldwide to say the time for climate denial is over. And especially from places like the World Bank, we demand better. And I'm gonna read a passage for the UN climate report. Observed increase in areas burned by wildfires have been attributed to human-induced climate change in some regions. Medium to high confidence. Adverse impacts from tropical cyclones with related losses and damages have increased due to sea level rise and the increase in heavy precipitation. Medium confidence. impacts in the natural and human systems from low onset processes such as ocean acidification, sea level rise, or regional decreases in precipitation have been also attributed to human-induced climate change. High confidence. Climate change is a thing of the climate change denial is a thing of the past, and the World Bank should know better and fire its president.
Yeah! Good morning. My name's Bill McKibben from Third Act, and I want to just begin by saying I was blown away when I read that New York Times interview with this guy Malpass last week. Blown away because I thought these guys had gotten a little more sophisticated in their climate denial. It was crazy to read this guy say not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times, 6 times in a row that he was not sure whether or not the planet was warming, didn't know about climate change, on and on and on. I mean, look, I'm a baseball fan, so I'm willing to give somebody 3 strikes at best. 6 is pushing it. And these were not even hard, tricky questions. This was T-ball, man. They were putting it up there, and he was whiffing one time after another. It is pathetic. I confess I hadn't paid as much attention to this guy as I should have, so I went and looked up his career, and the first thing it said was his last job before this was chief economist at Bear Stearns for the 6 years before it went bankrupt. Well, we cannot allow the planet to go bankrupt in the same kind of way. We need leadership that actually knows what it's doing out here. So let me read a little passage from the IPCC. You know, I wrote the first book about climate change back in 1989. It's not like any of this is new. It's not like it's controversial. It's not like it's hard to find. It's not like it's obscure science. This is the most obvious set of facts in the world. Approximately half the species assessed globally have shifted poleward or on land to higher elevations. Hundreds of local losses of species have been driven by increases in the magnitude of heat extremes, as well as mass mortality events on land and in the ocean, and loss of kelp forests. Some losses are already irreversible, such as the first species extinctions driven by climate change. Other impacts are approaching irreversibility, such as the impacts of hydrological change resulting from the retreat of glaciers or the changes in some mountain and Arctic ecosystems driven by permafrost thaw. There are global bureaucrats who are doing a great job now. The Secretary General of the UN has been speaking truth to power this last year like nobody we've ever seen. Day after day after day, talking about the fossil fuel companies and the banks that are supporting them. Well, one of the banks that's supporting the fossil fuel companies is the World Bank, and it is time for them to stop. Your job's supposed to be taking care of the planet, not melting it. Thank you.
Morning. I'm Phyllis Cutnow. I'm the CEO and president of the Climate Reality Project. And so I'm here to read also from the IPCC report. So climate scientists say with very high confidence that climate change has adversely affected physical health of people globally and mental health of people in the assessed regions. Climate change impacts on health are mediated through natural and human systems, including economic and social conditions and disruptions. High confidence there. In all regions, extreme heat events have resulted in human mortality and morbidity, climate scientists say, with very high levels of confidence. And we heard the speaker earlier today talk about how stressed people in this region can be. So I'm really proud to be here with the speakers and all of you, and would just repeat the very straightforward words of the Climate Reality Project's chairman and founder, Al Gore, last week when he said, and I want to quote, "We need to get a new head of the World Bank. It's ridiculous that we have a climate denier as the head of the World Bank, and the vice president is right. Mr. Malpass has not just denied the climate science, but with him at the helm, as Mr. McKibben said, he's invested billions of dollars in fossil fuels despite the bank's commitment to end financing for fossil fuel projects in all but the most exceptional cases. So what we need instead is at least $1 trillion in investment in renewables by 2030 if we're to achieve the global energy transition that we need to avert the climate crisis and protect human health and the impacts that I just read. So change has got to start at the top, and Malpass has to go. That's why we're all here today. And other development bank leaders should take notice as well. It's time to finance a future to protect people and the only planet we have. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Elaine Zuckerman of Gender Action, which holds the World Bank and other international financial institutions accountable for harmful climate and gender impacts. Also, we're a founding member of the Big Shift Global, which works to get the banks out of fossil fuels. First, I'll read my climate fact, and then I'd like to share a few thoughts that I was asked to contribute. So, the climate scientists say that the ocean is warming and ocean acidification have adversely affected food production from shellfish aquaculture and fisheries in some oceanic regions. High confidence. Increasing weather and climate extreme events, which have exposed millions of people to acute food insecurity and climate extreme events. They have exposed millions, observed in many locations in Africa, in Asia, in Central and South America, in the Smile Islands, all the way to the Arctic. High confidence. Jointly, sudden losses of food production and access to food, compounded by decreased diet diversity, have increased malnutrition in many communities. High confidence. Especially for indigenous peoples, small-scale food producers, and low-income households. High confidence. With children, elderly people, and pregnant people particularly impacted. High confidence. Roughly half of the world's population currently experience severe water scarcity for at least some of the year due to climatic and non-climatic drivers. Medium confidence. So that's our fact from the IPCC report. I'd also like to share thoughts on how the World Bank has contributed to climate crises over decades. The World Bank makes two different types of loans. It makes many types of loans, but two key ones. One of them used to be called structural adjustment loans that are today euphemized as development policy loans and policy-based loans. They have those two names. They contain conditions, used to be called conditionalities, that subsidize fossil fuel companies, Shell, Exxon, etc., and they remove subsidies that make energy unaffordable to the poor. So that's one type of loan. The other type of loan are conventional project loans for infrastructure and extractives. So for example, just to use one example, over a decade ago, the World Bank approved the Medupi coal plant project in South Africa for almost $4 billion in those days, probably $4.5 billion today. The harm to the environment and to people's livelihoods has just been disastrous and continues to be to this very day. Medupi's parent company, Eskom, to which the World Bank made the loan, is the world's largest sulfur dioxide producer in the entire world on this planet. There are endless examples of such coal projects and oil and gas projects if I could stand here all day and catalog them for you. But this is an example of a World Bank loan that is wrecking people's livelihoods and our planet. I'd like to close by inviting you all, for those of you who don't know, to a big demo called The World Bank Out of Fossil Fuels Now, that will be held here on October 14th, Friday at noon, which will be the first official day of the World Bank annual meetings. So join us all then, noon, October 14th. Hope to see you then. Let's get the World Bank out of fossils.
Good morning. My name is Tabitha Spence. The organization that I've been most active with over the last many years is the Haqq-e-Khalq Party, which is in Pakistan. And my husband is from Pakistan, and I regret that today no Pakistanis could be with us to speak on behalf of the people, the 30 to 50 million people who are displaced right now from the recent floods that continue to devastate the country to this day. I'll just read briefly my fact, and then I want to say a little bit about the demands for climate reparations coming out of Pakistan and other parts of the global south. Starting with the IPCC clip. So with high confidence, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said that between 2010 and 2020, human mortality from floods, droughts, and storms was 15 times higher in highly vulnerable regions compared to regions with low vulnerability. They said with high confidence that vulnerability at different spatial levels is exacerbated by inequality and marginalization linked to gender, ethnicity, low income, or combinations thereof. They said with high confidence that especially for many indigenous people and local communities, the effects are felt the worst. And they said with high confidence that present development challenges causing high vulnerability are influenced by historical and ongoing patterns of inequality such as colonialism, especially for many indigenous people and local communities around the world. And I just want to follow what Elaine was just saying about the dirty deeds of the World Bank in creating the climate crisis. Not just the World Bank, but the IMF, the policies of the United States government and the United States military's activities around the world. They're responsible for the climate crisis. They're responsible for so much of the poverty and underdevelopment around the world, and they can't get away with it. We're not just here today to say that Malpass has to go. We're here to say that these institutions need to be dismantled, that reparations need to be made available to people who have been underdeveloped and devastated for centuries. Thank you.
Good morning, buenos dias. My name is Dr. Frances Colon because I actually am a scientist. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm the Senior Director for International Climate Policy at the Center for American Progress. I'm a scientist, but not being a scientist is not an excuse to deny the science of hundreds of scientists from all over the world who have contributed to analysis and reports for years through the IPCC. We have very high confidence about what is happening to our world and why. I'm also ella because I am Puerto Rican. And in 2017, a supercharged hurricane raised over the place where I was born. It destroyed 80% of our crops, destroyed the homes of family members and friends, displaced thousands of people, and thousands were lost, directly and indirectly, in the days after. Last week, another hurricane hit my home place. And once again, folks lost everything. And this is what it is going to look like in the future. Hit after hit after hit. And this is exactly the type of work that the World Bank is supposed to do. Help countries around the world transition to clean energy, become more resilient, not underwriting fossil fuel projects, not denying climate science. This is why it is ridiculous to deny climate science, and it is ridiculous that Malpass is still in place at the World Bank. I will now read you my climate fact. Financial constraints are important determinants of soft limits to adaptation across sectors and all regions. We know this with scientific high confidence. Although global tracked climate finance has shown an upward trend since AR5, current global financial flows for adaptation, including from public and private finance sources, are insufficient for and constrain implementation of adaptation options, especially in developing countries. We know this with scientific high confidence. The overwhelming majority of global tracked climate finance was targeted to mitigation, while a small portion was targeted to adaptation. We know this with very high scientific confidence. Adaptation finance has come predominantly from public sources. We know this with very high confidence. Adverse climate impacts can reduce the availability of financial resources by incurring losses and damages through impending national economic growth, thereby further increasing financial constraints for adaptation, particularly for developing and least developed countries. This is why we know Malpass must go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriela Valentin Diaz. My pronouns are she and ella, and like Francis, I am also Puerto Rican. I'm also a human rights and environmental rights attorney, but most importantly to me, and more relevant to the conversation here, is my identity as a Puerto Rican woman. I'll first read you my fact because it is very relevant to what I will talk about after the fact. In urban settings, observed climate change has caused impacts on human health, livelihoods, and key infrastructure. Multiple climate and non-climate hazards impact cities, settlements, and infrastructure, and sometimes coincide, magnifying damage. Hot extremes, including heat waves, have intensified in cities, where they have also aggravated air pollution events and limited functioning of key infrastructure. This is all known with high confidence. Observed impacts are concentrated amongst the economically and socially marginalized urban residents in informal settings. Infrastructure, including transportation, water, sanitation, and energy systems, have all been compromised by extreme and slow onset events, with resulting economic losses, disruptions of services, and impacts to well-being. This is also stated with high confidence. Like I said, I am from the beautiful island of Puerto Rico, which, as you may have heard, has been in the dark for over a week as a result of the man-made climate crisis and the man-led corruption that prioritizes profits and self-enrichment over people and the environment.
Shame!
In fact, Puerto Rico's electrical grid is a key example of the climate fact that I just read. Exactly 5 years after Hurricane Maria left Puerto Ricans in the dark without power, water, and communications, the island, which is one of the oldest colonies in the world, has been impacted by another major atmospheric event that left the island in the same struggle, a foreseeable and preventable struggle. Hurricane Maria, a Category 5 storm, destroyed the electrical grid in 2017. Since then, decision makers have had the time to embrace the science. They've had the time to begin a just energy transition, and they've had the time to act to protect the environment and human life from more frequent and stronger extreme weather events that will inevitably affect places like Puerto Rico, a community that is undeniably on the front lines of climate change. Instead, they chose to double down on the fossil fuel-dependent energy grid and privatize the electrical system. After Maria, a U.S.-imposed fiscal oversight board sold Puerto Rico's energy future to Luma Energy. This private company has failed to rebuild the energy grid after Maria and has now left Puerto Rico without electricity once again after a Category 1 hurricane. This is one of the many effects of climate denial in Puerto Rico. The refusal to ditch fossil fuels and switch to clean energy is killing people in Puerto Rico right now. It's killing the diabetic who can't properly store their insulin because they've spent a week without power. It's killing the elderly who have been forced to deal with a 105-degree heat index in the days after the hurricane without water or electricity to help keep them cool. Privatization, colonialism, and prioritizing profits are killing people in Puerto Rico. Climate denial is killing people. To address the climate crisis, we not only have to embrace the science, but we have to eliminate and dismantle all the colonial and neocolonial institutions that enable corrupt decision makers to kill our environment and our people. Decision makers like Mr. Malpass. In Puerto Rico, that means canceling the private contract of Luma Energy, transitioning to solar energy, abolishing the U.S.-imposed fiscal oversight board, and full decolonization of the island. Thank you.